If nobody join also, we'll start in a minute.
Okay, sir. Sure, sure.
I think we can start.
Okay, sure, sir. So, good morning, dear learners. We are going to deal with colonial aspects of migration and diaspora community today. And this is MDI fourth chapter, and we are going to deal the 2 units of that under block 2. So I'm Dr. M. Sahayaraj from Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, dealing with this MDI 4 paper. So, dear learners, when we deal on the colonial period, we should also understand the concept of indentured labor. In simple term, we can consider that as the during colonial period, how the labor are considered as a slave and they are given low wages and taken anywhere inside the country and apart from the country. So this is a simple understanding of that. But in this unit, we are going to deal about the learning objectives of that is we are going to learn the definition, context, and regional origins of indentured labor migration, and how these main features of this indentured labor migration and plantation life and resistance, which is very important aspect of the particular labor system, and overview of Indian women, how Indian women treated or or marginalized in this indentured labor system, and the construction of identity and Indian indentured labor migration across the world with case studies are learning today of under this colonial and Unit 38 considers the indentured labor migration. So let us understand the first slide shows this definition. When you speak about the uh, definition part, before that we should understand the industrial revolution and colonial capital, that is expansion of industrial agriculture, especially on the aspect of the food like tea, coffee, sugar, and rubber. This industrial revolution took place in this agricultural field, and this leads to the demand for unskilled labor. So they need unskilled labor in tea plantation, or coffee and the sugarcane plantation and rubber industry. So this led to the shift of Indian labor due to the socio-economic crisis caused by British policies. So there is a economic crisis. People are under poverty or not able to have good food system and everything. So there is a socio-economic crisis that is happening in India. So that led that forced the Indian labor to shift also, and the British government has made use of that. So, Indian system, when you say it is a recruitment mechanism, we should understand from 1934 to 1917 how this Indian labor migration took place and how the recruitment mechanisms also played a role. And the major colonial involved, like Mauritius, Caribbean, Fiji, East Africa, that we should understand how this major colonies of the British government, how they used these countries. So this is the brief understanding that we are going to have. And when we talk about uh, the the settlement in various parts of the globe, resulted in global spread of Indian diaspora, numbering around 27 million today. So the fourth and fifth generation descendants of these laborers have emerged as a strategic uh, asset and soft power of India give their vast numerical strength and preservation of Indian cultural values. And we move from this to the definition and context and regional origins. When you speak about the definition of uh, indentured labor, uh, we first understand, as I have said, as we have seen in the just before this, and simply defined as a contractual bond. We say when you say intangible, can be simply defined as a contractual bond, manual labor. We should understand that contractual. There is a contract bond, and it's a manual labor. It is not like skilled labor, it's a manual labor. So, agreement signed between an individual to work for a prescribed period of time with an employer or planter in exchange of covering the cost of his or her passage. So, there is a sign, there is a contract between the employer and the labor who is going to do manual labor in the field or the plantation. So that employer is also considered as a planter. So in the contract, the specified wage rate. So what is the wage they must be given? Their working hours, or whether they are given free housing or not, and type of work, what type of work they have to do, everything will be in detail, and whether they are given a medical aid or not, everything in the contract. So it was a contract by which the labor migrant was born to work for an employer for 3 to 5 years, performing the task assigned to him for a fixed wage, free medical aid, etc., ration food or something like that. So it was in the review of Conti in 1951, he defines this. So everything is mentioned. Even nowadays, we can see people move to Arab countries, for example, they have this kind of intentional labor system where they sign and go, they will do for 2 to 3 years. And we see sometimes in news that people are not doing proper job or something like that, there will be a legal issue sued on the Indentured labor. So what they do after the contract, they after the contract, the Indentured labor would either extend his work period or change his employer, or was entitled to free or subsidized return passage. So they will come back, or they will change the employer, or with the same employer they will do the continue their work. So everything. So in words of uh, famous writer Carter, he said that an indentured migrant was an individual who had not paid his or her passage, and but had entered into a written agreement to do service of manual labor for a fixed period of time against the cost of passage. So when you say passage, it's an agreement. So in the agreement, they will do all sort of work. Sometimes they are uh, something will be written on the passage or in the agreement, but they will not be given those offers there. So it can be pointed out that terms and conditions were more or less same for all colonies in general, in the minor variations. So there will be a minor variation because everything almost controlled by British during that time, and they will do that in all the part. And when you see the push and pull factors, for example, the push factor, we know what is pushing them from their homeland to go there, and what is pulling them from their hosting land. So the pushing, we know very well that the poverty, unemployment are the main reasons. So people are under poverty line. They need to be the families need to be given food and everything. Unemployment is the main reason for poverty, and feminist and a lot of health issues, socioeconomic stagnation in the country are the pushing factor, because the caste system also played a role in terms of getting job. So these are pushing factors from India to move to some other countries. So what is the pulling factors? The promises of stable income. There is a promise in the agreement that there will be a stable income for that, maybe $100, $2,200 or somewhere. This is a stable income for them. So the better living conditions by recruiters. So we will give hostel facilities or housing facility, infrastructure, hospital, medical care, and everything. So there is a promise that the countries are able to give this many the non-strategic benefit. So they will move. These are the pushing factor when we consider. When you say regional origins, so there are some kind of where the people mostly moved. There is also we should see some from north and some from south. You see the name of the places, the northern India. You see Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, and suddenly there are people from Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and key ports like Calcutta, Madras are the ports where they move, or they got migrated. They moved from one region to another. So when you see these as the regional origins, these are the places where they moved. And you see in your thing the period of migration, name of the colonies, if you see from Mauritius from 1834 to 1900, there are approximately 4 lakhs 50,000 number of immigrants from India. And you see Malaya, there are 2 lakhs 50,000. If you see Malaya, it's mostly from Tamil Nadu region. And you see the St. Lucia, and the people, uh, the British government has moved them. Fiji, for example, there are around 60,000 people, nearly 70,000 were moved during the period of 1879 to 1916. And uh, and the East Africa, there are around 40,000 people moved. So, what prompted the Indians to immigrate in large numbers, heeding the call of the colonial planters, is uh, the colonial environment was prevalence of the advance of socio-economic condition during the British rule. So there was a correlation or connection between British expansion in India and the international commoditization of Indian labor. So British has expanded their rule in India. Their places they able to occupy almost the 90 percentage of India, and they are able to push the people. And there is also small heap of the international commoditization where people were able to buy and use the production of the other countries. So this was the pushing factor, and the India economy was integrated with the world economy by heralding the social economic structural shifts, resulting major socio-economic consequences. Right. You see sometimes when in my village you go and see people, they in 80s, you see people have bought the tape recorder from Malaysia, seeing it's like famous like anything because their product is very good. And this kind of commoditization takes place of this diaspora community during that time. So they will go and purchase something, and there is a kind of socioeconomic status also. And people of their neighbors will ask, "Boy, come when you go next time, bring this tape recorder for me. How much I need to pay?" And everything. This becomes an economy for sometimes. And factors like commercialization of agriculture, stagnant rural economy, and decline of handicraft industry are the main reasons where the urban enclave-based industrial development and zamindari system and the recurring famines had a degraded the socio-economic conditions of rural India as they were excluded from the economic development. So these are the main reasons it's pushed. And as I have said, the rigid caste system also fueled the need of new avenues for opportunities of survival and lead a significant life. And Indian intensive labor to British colonies were widely drawn from northern and eastern and southern parts of India, while the contribution of western and northwestern parts of India was smaller scale. The southern part was high. Then you see the French India between 1842 to and 1916 supplied indentured labor to its colonies in West India and the Reunion Island, but it was later banned after the promulgation of Immigration Act. So you see, people are moving because of the various reasons, and the British government exactly tapped the people based on their uh, the factors which led them. So people are, due to their poverty and famine and the disease or declining health system, they were moving. They want to move, and you have these reasons and the main features of internal labor migration. That's we need to discuss further. And when you say uh, the plantation life and resistance, when you say plantation life, there is a harsh working condition. So when you uh, read these main features of Indian labor migration, there are a lot of act has come into. Uh, uh, for example, the Indian Act of 1942, uh, where the first comprehensive measure to provide a semblance of government control and supervision regarding this immigration. And Immigration Act 13 of 1864 clearly defined the duty of the protector of immigrants. And 1882, the government of India passed on all encompassing Immigration Act with a minor modification 1908, which governed indentured immigration until it ended in 1917. So these are the various acts which has come to see the how the laborers are being recruited or taken to other countries and how they are treated. And the social origin of indentured labor were mostly drawn from middle peasant
Şu
caste.
az bir baskın asın bir.
Hello,
Hoş şükür, teşekkür ठीक है.
excuse me, sir. Bashir, sir.
Sorry, sir. I unmuted it.
Sorry, no problem, no problem. Please unmute it. Thank you. So the social origin, when you say of indentured labor, were mostly drawn from middle peasant caste, followed by lower caste or you see uh, Dalits, when you say, or a fraction of higher caste, including a significant number of Muslims, mainly from the northern and southern parts of few numbers from western parts of India. So this is what the literature says by Tinker and Lord. So the reason behind this is because they are segregated, they are not given jobs, and their level of income are low. So the indentured laborers were not only recruited for agricultural work, but were also used for public works like laying railway lines, construction of roads, building, and so on. So the indentured system was based on the principle of penal contract labor, and so was the form of unfree labor. So the penal sanctions were used as an instrument to condition the erring laborers and mainly to oppress them. So they are started penalizing the people. So they start sending them those who are under punishment to as a contract labor, and they were as conditioned as unfree labor, means they have to work. They don't have any rights. So the indentured system can be characterized by struggle, sacrifice, and even say we can say that resistance on the part of indentured laborers. So, as a system was closely connected to slavery, it was an exile to bondage. As many found that they had exchanged one from poverty and severe servitude to another. So, that is we understand that how these were uh, done by the British government, and what during the contract also we should see during of the contract, the duration of the contract period was from 1 year and then was increased to 3 years by an ordinance number 3, 1849. And they even raised to 5 years. Imagine uh, uh, Mauritius plus countries, they have increased to 5 years. If I go for a contract, I will be there for 5 years. So in case of West Indians, the contract period was initially 10 years and they later reduced to 5 years after that. So the period of 5 years was allowed for all the colonies more or less until its abolition. So the period of 5 years, almost all the countries, because British government, as we have discussed, is doing. And when we see the wages and duration of work, again, we should also look into how they are given the wages and duration and everything. So that also we have to see. When we see the wages and duration of work, had a fixed rate of pay throughout the indentured period. So if I go for example, the first year of my labor system there, if my salary is 50 rupees, all the 5 years my salary is 50 rupees per month. So the payment was made weekly in the colony of Jamaica and British Columbia. In case of other countries, it was fortnightly, and Mauritius is monthly. So they have different type of paying the wage. So some countries they pay for a week, and some are 2 weeks, and some are per month. So laborers had to work for 5 days a week and 7 hours a day in British Columbia. In case of other countries, 6 days in a week, with the exclusion of holidays, 9 hours per day. So they can take a leave, but 9 hours they have to work. So we see some people now today say that we have Indians who work for 70 hours a day, and there's a lot of resistance among the people. You see, during that time, they worked around this, which is exploitation, I say. So 28 days in total for a year. Though in Mauritius, the laborers had to work 9 hours per day from Monday to Saturday, and for 2 hours on Sundays, anonymous. So even they are not given Sundays also a holiday. They say that 2 hours they have to work on Sundays. So punishment for absence from work. So in Mauritius, the absence for laborers from work led to deprivation of wage and rations. They are not given any kind of rations production, rations things, and a half penny cut on every shilling of his monthly wages, or imprisonment for 14 days, or extension of his contract. So if they are being absent for the work. So if the laborers were absent from work for 3 continuous days, continuously 3 days, he was imprisoned for 3 months. Imagine. And in other countries, the laborers were punished for 7 days, while 2 months imprisonment followed by 5 days of absence from work in British Columbia. So all we can say that they are all exploited. They were not given the kind of the dignity of their work, dignity of being a human, and their rights were violated during that time. And return passage, the free return passage was one of the basic principles of the indentureship at the end of the contract. So they must be given free return. There was a disparity in arrangement of return passage among the labor immigrant important colonies. So they are not given return passage. They are not giving immediately upon their contract. In contrast, the colonial government paid full return in Trinidad country. They given everything. So some countries are cheating, some countries are able to do. So these are the things. And when you see the process of recruitment, so when you see process of recruitment, the laborers was long and cumbersome of intending the immigrants. The licensed immigrants agents were permitted. They given permitted to operate from the erstwhile port cities of Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. So there are licensed immigrants agents. So the act, they also the British government has enacted the Act 5 of 1837 stipulated the various terms and regulation conditions for recruiting agencies. Example, they called the recruiting the potential migrants. So don't recruit everyone, recruit the potential migrants. So when you say potential migrants, they say the age group, health checkup, and everything. And in reality, the immigration agents hardly recruited except in the vicinity of immigration deports. He forwarded all the requests from the colonies to sub-brands in the countryside. So the sub-agents employed recruiters who have licensed by the protector of the immigration on the recommendation of the immigration agent. So there is a subcontract people. So they will recruit from the local community. So the license was given for a year, renewable, countersigned by the magistrate of the district where recruiter desired to work. So they systemized it. They systemized it from the top level to the bottom level. So the remuneration was based on the colonies for which they worked for. So it's like now, when you go US as a doctor, there is a different wage. When you go to Singapore, there is a different wage. So the based on that during that time also, based upon the colonies for which they work, the remuneration differs. So the recruiter were mostly male and operated in their own business. They employed unlicensed recruiters called arcatis. Okay. So what they do? They have some people who are unlicensed recruiters who mobilize the laborers by hook and crook, given their local knowledge and familiarity of place, local issues, customs, and languages. So people will do the kind of things and like a middleman, okay, who is not kind of a person authorized. And the recruiters were mostly male and operated their own business. So they started their own business of this. And it was mandated by the colonial government that the migration of labor should be volunteer. So very, very important. The migration of labor should be volunteer. This was mandated by the colonial government. Not forceful recruitment of laborers by the recruiting agencies for commercial gains was to be done. Uh, so, so they are very clear that these type of things need to be abolished. So the immigration records in Calcutta reveals little evidence of fraud, deception, of kidnapping to mobilize the indentured migrants. Okay, so they started because there's a huge money. So in Calcutta, what they do, they indulge in fraud. They started kidnapping the people, and however, uh, uh, according to Tinker, the author, the recruiter and their unlicensed sub-agents, artists with local knowledge and context, lured the vulnerable by telling them for fancy tales and promised opportunities was to be exploited. So there is a lot of exploitation by the agents because they say they promise a lot to them. They will be given, okay, now like a cyber crime, I can say. They will say false promises, will earn money and everything. So they recruit the people because they earn money by this. And so forced punishment, kidnapping, and deception were adopted to meet the increasing demand of the laborers for commercial interest by the recruiters. So this was happening in terms of recruitment, even without checking the migrants' background, so as to meet the given quotas by the recruiting agencies. They were transported to hard agricultural labor. Okay. So the recruiting agencies, if they send 50 people, if they send 100 people, they get few dollars. So what they did for that, to finish that quota, they are sending to even not matching, whether even if they are matching with the labor force or not, what the countries are expecting, they send all the agricultural labor. For instance, in case of Natal, during 1992, 1891 to 92, labor dispatched to Natal included travelers, weavers, shopkeepers, beggars sometimes, okay, all whom were generally unsuited for the unskilled agricultural work. So they sent all the people. See your where the indentured laborers were uh, take a way, for example, from where they are taking the travel from 1856 to 1916. There's a data in your reading material. You find a lot of people started from the Madras, Calcutta, Bombay, or Karachi, okay, and French ports. They use that way to send the people to other countries. And plantation life and resistance. The very important area. When you say plantation life and resistance, it's the harsh working conditions we know, and overwork, low wages, malnutrition, diseases, plantation life, and uh, and lot of resistance also took place. So the plantation life has restricted the free movement of laborers outside their estates. So they have to stay, they have to be there. They are not allowed. They should not go out for any kind of their social life. So they should be there in the plantation. For example, imagine if they are working in a tea plantation, they should work fully the entire 5 years. They should be there in the tree plantation. And if it is a sugar cane, they should be there. Their housing and everything will be given inside the area. So they are not given free movement of laborers outside the estates. So the workers were confined to the estates through formal and informal system of control. And conditions of the contracts were harshly enforced through labor techniques. So what happens? So the Indian managers are known as the Sardars, were appointed to manage the effective working of the laborers. Oh, so the Indian managers were appointed. So every day, reality of plantation life of the laborers was marked by grinding overwork, low wages, malnutrition, persistent illness, the issue of poor housing, lack of medical facilities. So, range of punitive measures, including beating. So they were even beaten, fines and imprisonment. So imagine the people were even managed by the Indian managers. They are very cruel. British government is very play strategic role in it. So they were appointed by the Indian managers. So they will identify, and the punishment is very severe when they violate the rules of that particular planter. So the introduction of legislation stopped the abuse of the employers over the laborers was ineffective. They are not able to follow that. And the introduction of legislation to stop all is uh, waste. And the hard labor and hostile conditions impacted the health of indentured workers, leading to high rate of job-related and environmentally related disease. Mortality rate is high. And for example, the country Fiji stood first in terms of suicide rate of laborers. Okay, at 64 per 100. For 100 people in Fiji during that time, 64 people were committed suicide. Imagine, followed by Natal. And on the face of tough working environment, many poems and baldas were composed by themselves, describing their life on the plantation. So the work of Kultitude captures of the experience of indentured laborers through their poems and ballads. So you find that uh, as a plantation workers, how their condition is all about. They were struggling there, and their working condition is very bad. Imagine 64 out of 100 committed suicide during that time in Fiji, according to the record. So people were beaten, people were punished, and due to that environment, they were falling sick, and there are related diseases and everything. So adverse working condition, persistent abuse led to collective actions by the laborers, which manifested through a variety of passive and active methods. So they come together, the laborers. So in case of Fiji, a major strike broke out in the year 1886, where 130 workers marched from the Cornovia, there's a, to the agent general my immigration, where they worked, that's plantation name, general of immigration in SWA, by carrying their work instruments. Okay, so they started protesting. So in the colonies of Mauritius and Natal, the large scale strike took place in the year 1872 to 1913, respectively. So further, the laborers were adopted to array of the methods to show their anger. So this made them to how to what method I need to show my anger, and dissent, including absenteeism, idleness. So they all absent, go for idleness, not working, destruction of property, and the tools of the employers and drunkenness. So, however, the resistance against the dominance of planters was controlled through more stringent legislation. Okay, so due to the dominance of the planters, there were a lot of legislation through which they are able to control their uh, employees or laborers. So this is what the condition when we see about the labor system of colonial plantation life and resistance when you say, and you see the weak legislation protection and everything. So they started all sort of protesting that, and these are the conditions of the plantation life and resistance there. So we see the women in the indentured labor system. So it's another factor that we have to see. Very, very important. Even though their numbers may be very, very small compared to men, how they are being treated. Okay, especially that we have to understand. So the experience of the, I say the Indian women, under not much explored by the scholars. But in the beginning, women hardly joined in the labor workforce as they were viewed as a burden by the employer. And some efforts were made to induct women in the indentured labor force in 1840s to 1850s. So the hiring of women gained momentum after 1860s. The proportion of women to men varied throughout the indentured period. So it was finally decided they have the ratio of 40 to 100, which remained in force throughout the period. So in general, they were considered as a reserve labor by the employers through though they performed productive and reproductive roles. So due to that, they are considered as a reserved labor. So Indian women, indentured laborers, performed tasks like hoeing, planting, weeding, cutting, and other light work than men. So in plantation, they will go for tea plantation, planting it and weeding it, some kind of cutting work, small, small work, which is light work. And they worked 8 to 10 hours, but were paid a fraction of male wages and received half of the rations allotted to men. Imagine if they are given 50, they are given not even 25, merely 10. And ration also allotted to them is very, very less. So Indian traditional patriarchy was reconstituted in alien environment. So they were subjected to negative stereotyping and performed the traditional roles of daughter, wife, and mother. So at the same time, they challenged the colonial and traditional patriarchy and exercised their agency to assert their gender identities and created their own political space. So, for instance, Valliyamma Mudaliyar of Tamil origin and Bai Fatima and Kasturba played a vital role in Satyagraha struggle in 1913 in South Africa. Okay, so they were involved in it. Okay, and so they started their presence over there in terms of this type of exploitation, even though they faced. So, with regard to the condition of women in Fiji and other countries, observed that women, it has been shown here, generally suffered greater hardship than men. So, they shouldered the dual burden of plantation work, the double standards of morality, and carried the blame for many for of the ills of indenture. And because they cook and give everything, so they were not the chaste heroines of Indian mythology that the Indian nationalists made them out to be. But neither they are, on the other hand, where they are considered immoral, and they were treated as they were all exploited over there. So the sexual imbalance, that is 40 to 100, resulted in sexual harassment, even number of unfaithful wives in countries like Fiji. So because of this ratio, and in Fiji there were 330 cases of murder due to sexual jealousy between 1885 to 1920. And however, while analyzing the situation in British Kenya century, they observed that the women led to more bargaining power coupled with their independent earning capacity. So enhance their independence of the man or husband. So these are the situations of the women in the during the indenture period. So they were all exploited, and due to this ratio, there was a lot of exploitation because 40 and 100. The sexual imbalance lead to murder, a crime. Okay, and one positive that British Kenya is saying that they were able to bargain. They will bargain for the money, the salary, so they were able to get it. So that is happening. That has as a positive note of the women migration during that period. And construction of identity is another crucial area when we see the women after mm, looking at the thing. And when we look at to the construction of identity, how they construct the identity, because they work for longer time, do they able to bring the identity for their work? So they were very reluctant to adapt a new values and norms as they were the indentured labor. They were housed in a plantation environment. The preservation of Indian culture values remains. So though this type of labors could not transplant the traditional Indian social and the cultural institution, they adapted and negotiated to the new environment by culturally borrowing from the host societies with the maintenance of few of their own. And when you speak about the construction of identity, we say that the coolie identity. When you say coolie identity of indentured labor had now been replaced by the middle or entrepreneurial class of descendants of indentured laborers who were catching up with the economic growth of their respective host countries. For instance, a successful merchant came as a boy with his parents from India. He never attended a school. He worked full time in the uh, Paragrat's gang on the estate. After his parent indentureship ended, he worked full time as a huckster and traveled throughout the uh, Trinidad and selling dry goods. And by 1880, he had enough money to buy a property in High Street, the main street of San Fernando, and establish a store there. His name is Rahmat. Okay, so these are the identity they brought it. And later he stepped branches at Point Pyre and various places in that country. In addition, he owned cocoa states in the same country. So today, one of his grandsons is engaged in the essential business of bottling and selling liquefied petroleum gas (LPG). Okay. So likewise, there are numerous examples of rags of rich to riches stories among the descendants of indentured labor across the world. So they go as a beggar and become the rich of that particular country. So these are the standard kind of things, and they constructed the identity over there. So this Indian indentured labor migration across the world has done a very, very remarkable thing there. So they are also started the kind of bringing the identity of the nation. And challenges and resistance, when you say social and sexual excellence challenge, and agency and resistance, and evolving gender relations. When you say imbalanced gender ratio led to, which we have seen in the women and things. Um, so Satyagraha struggle in South Africa and everything, where our people involved in it. And identity construction, as I have said, cultural adaptation. So maintain Indian cultural practices, especially in closer regions, East Africa and Malaya. They didn't leave our identity, and longer distance led to loss of ties and cultural homogenization and transformation of identity, decline to caste distinction, the emergence of common Indian identity. So people able to bring their identity there and started becoming buying the land over there and being a businessman and everything. So legacy and identity construction. Further, if you discuss, as I have said, is here Raghuman, who is from plantation worker to successful entrepreneur, and the descendants played a role in anti-colonial movements and national building in host countries. So these are some of the examples where people involved in it. So, so Indian indentured labor migration in Mauritius, we see some case studies regarding that. So the British government was the island of Mauritius to be the first uh, site for what it called the Great Experiment. So the British government first sent the people as indentured labor to the country of Mauritius, which is an island, in early 1834. It set precedent for the other British, French, and Dutch colonies in connection with the Indian indentured labor migration. The first batch of Indian laborers arrived after a travel of 10 weeks, means 2.5 months, from the port of Calcutta in the year 1834. So, before the arrival of the Indian indentured laborers, Mauritius had experimented the Indian convicts, how we have to get from them. So the sugar industry came into beginning in 1790s and expanded after the British conquest. Imagine in uh, Mauritius also the British were there. And between 1834 to 1910, over 500,000 of migrants entered Mauritius. The ratio of Indian women indentured laborers was 3,300. So the laborers were mainly drawn from northern India, followed by erstwhile Madras and Bombay presidencies, 19 presidencies during that time. So out of the important indentured migrants, 31% of the laborers had returned back to India after the end of the period, their contract period. So Indians were encouraged to settle, resulting in the emergence of majority ethnic community of Mauritius. They are culturally and politically active, retaining strong ties with India. So Mauritius now an independent republic with a constitutional monarchy consisting of Indian president and Indian prime minister. Imagine. So the immigration depot in Mauritius, Prosi Hut, was built in 1849 to receive the laborers from India, China, and Southeast Asia. So on which the was declared as a UNESCO heritage site recently. And South Indian indentured immigration to sugar colonies. So you see that Mauritius, Fiji, in Mauritius, you see 31.9 percentage of is of from Indian origin, and Fiji, for example. Okay, so these are the some of the examples where you see the people and sugar plantation in countries like Caribbean greatly demanded unskilled cheap labor force in the absence of slaves as well as locals. So was the British Guiana was the first Caribbean country to receive Indian indentured laborers in the year 1838, and when the slave system was abolished. So 4 years after Mauritius in the year 1938, the hill coolies from northern India were imported through the Calcutta Company of Glindas and Kobai John, and who owned sugar estates in British Kenya. So they were all shifted and to other countries. So in case of Jamaica, the first batch of 261 Indians arrived in the uh, Blundell Hunter in 1849. So they are after the experiment in Mauritius, the other countries were eager to take Indian people as a laborers. Okay. Over 30,000 intended labor reached over the years. In just a year, 30,000 people were spread across. So it seems that more than half million Indians were brought to Gorbian between 1832 1917, and they were commonly known as East Indians in the Gorbian world. Although the migrants were from South and other parts of India, the bulk of Indian migrants to the Gorbian countries of either British or Dutch colonies came mainly from northern India, especially from the western part of Bihar and eastern part of Uttar Pradesh, and from the embarked through the port of Calcutta. So the ship journey from Calcutta to Caribbean took there 4 months, 3 to 4 months, having between 270 to 510 days. And after embarkation, they were taken to plantation and were housed on the states. The houses were nothing but wooden barks, which are slave quarters earlier. So they were permitted to cultivate a small patch of land for growing vegetables and keep cows or pigs. The poor drainage system and lack of light and ventilation had led to spread diseases like malaria, hookworm, and so on. So they were given a place where the slaves were there previously, and it leads to a lot of diseases. And they had to work around 9 hours per day and 6 days per week. The work was allotted based on age, sex, ability, and experience. So, a laborman in general was given the task of forking and cutting cane under the overseer, who was usually an Indian, and women did the task of weeding, while skilled estate workers were made to work in sugar mills. Besides, they also served as estate as carpenters, stockkeepers, grooms, and watchmen. So these are the conditions, the case studies we say how the uh, Indian migrants were treated, or how they are employed. So after the contract period ended, they had the provision of return passage. But most of them stayed and on and chose to remain in those Caribbean countries for more host of reasons: expanding opportunities for work, gaining land in layoff return passage. So they give a small amount of money. If you are not going returning to your country, we will give this much amount. I think social position faster than the home country. So they are able to get the social position. Further, many disliked the idea of returning back to India, as they would be treated or rejected for having lost their purity of caste since they had crossed the ocean. So this was the initial period, and they had lived with unfamiliar lower caste and disgradable caste taboos. And due to caste discrimination and there is a purity and all those things, they remained there. They also realized that their resettlement would be tough and time consuming. Some did come back with their savings and faced many hardships, and that also happened. So they soon returned back. So it seems that not more than a quarter of Indian migrants to the Caribbean returned to India. Okay, so free Indian indentured laborers as early 1860s availed grown lands that were offered by the colonial government of their return passage, which facilitated them to become independent farmers. Later emerged as the largest producer of sugarcane and rice in the countries like British and Trinidad. Some of them diverted themselves to take up various occupation and entrepreneurship. So this is what the conditions, and they comparatively they are getting some job or social recognition there, so they stop returning. Only quarter of them return, and some again return to their host countries because they had a decent life they felt there due to the caste discrimination in India. So nevertheless, they face discrimination and ethnic tension in the wake of decolonization in countries. In case of other the countries like British Kenya and Suriname, the descendants of the Indian laborers have been emigrating to various other countries due to the persistence of racial strife, resulting in scattering across the globe and even eventually have become the transition Indian community. So you see how the different countries they lived their labor and everything, and Caribbean countries we have seen, and you see the Fiji, for example, and how they arrival in Fiji, it's like 1879. You see the around 60,000 laborers migrated primarily from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and young labor force, that is 40 percentage of the men and 40 percentage women are under the age of 20. Imagine. And harsh plantation life, referred to hell or brothel by laborers with severe exploitation, happen in Fiji. So labor faced caste dilution, racial discrimination, and cultural loss, and especially in Fiji. And the legacy of Indo-Fijians, post-indentured laborers became leases, traders, playing key roles in Fiji economy. So uh, uh, Indian Fijians faced discrimination mobs and post-independence, leading to migration and the creation of transnational community. And imagine in 2013, Constitution marked the turning point of the better political treatment of Indo-Fijians. So people of Indian origins are treated. They are given vote permission. They are given. They can involve in standing for the election and everything. So this was the Indian this, Fiji condition uh, during these pre-colonial the colonial period. So there's the same when you see in South Africa and Malaysia, everywhere. The same condition was were prevailing. Uh, when you see this situation from colonial period of what we have discussed so far for an hour, we understand that how the people in colonial period migrated and what is their condition, and where is even that during that condition also they were able to see the kind of bring the kind of identity for the Indian labor, Indian system by contributing to their economy as a whole. So this is what the all about the system is we discuss, and I hope we have understood what is this indenture and push and pull factors of that, where most of the people were migrated, and plantation life and resistance we have, how they have treated and how they resist. That is also very, very important. They involved in strike and absenteeism and everything. Ideally, sitting kind of, they were able to resist of uh, for their treatment. And women in the indentured labor system and the challenges they faced, and we have discussed the legacy and identity construction and legal identity. When you say what is their problem of the legacy and identity construction, you have seen some examples how people moved ahead of the bigger state and able to buy the land over there, involved in the entrepreneurial activity, strong businessman over there. So we also discussed about the migration of in Mauritius and how they were treated. Okay, we also had a discussion of Caribbean and Fiji altogether. So these are the certain things we should remember when we deal about the colonial era of the system and Indian uh, people how they were treated over there. And another thing also, you see that uh, there are Indian indentured labor in Mauritius case study where the 1834 by British in Mauritius is a great experiment, and the details of Migrants worked primarily in the sugar industry. So first batch arrived in the 1834 from Calcutta after a 10 weeks journey, and around 5 lakhs intended migrants and 30% of female laborers, majority from northern India, and 30% returned to India after their contract. So result emergence of Indian majority ethnic community culturally, politically, and they were considered UNESCO a World Heritage Site now because it has improved the percentage of the migration, the total population of Indian laborers is high there. So we have seen the Caribbean and Fiji. So began in British Kenya, 1838 with 245 migrants, and in 1917 we see around 5 lakhs. Harsh living, working conditions, cash flows deterred return. Many stayed, gained land, and integrated economically despite ethnic tension and post-decolonization. You see, Fiji the same. So began in 1879 under British governance. 60,000 Indians arrived here by 1916. So majority from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and central provinces. So the Indo-Fijian immigration to transnational communities. So they gained a lot of agriculture and trade activities in those countries and improved their economic conditions as well as the country host countries' economic condition. And South Africa and beyond. You see South Africa and beyond. So in South Africa, you see that in 1860 for sugar plantation in Natal, entered in 1911, almost 150, 1,50,000 migrants were from Madras and Calcutta there in South Africa. So there is a racial segregation, limited economic activities, but many stayed there. And see French colonies, Tamil majority migrants, reunion, okay, and meeting and other countries, Guadeloupe or 1848 to 1917. So socio-economic integration with the cultural preservation and larger populations were established there. And when you take into Malaysia and Singapore, indentured migration is almost 2,50,000 of Indians and transnational to organized system after 1910. So these are the various things we should remember historically in terms of migration that took place in the countries across the nation. So how the Indian population during the colonial period and how much migration took place, how they were treated, and what are the act or laws took place, and even though how they resist and how they establish the transnational communities and diaspora community there, and these are the base for what we are now and how we are treated today, and everything it is because started with very unsafe and not with a happy experience with those places because of that many were exploited due to the colonial system, due to the British era, and for the purpose of major production uh, and uh, production centric industries or plantation, people are exploited, and we also see the women migration due to women migration, and the ratio was small how women were treated with low wages and everything, and this is all about the base for the colonial period that we intend to discuss today. So any questions you can ask, or we can meet it in another class.
Dr. Rex, we have
Yes,
this unit is over now.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of this unit is almost.
Okay, so you will be starting another unit or how?
Uh, Another unit in another time. Next class.
No, now we'll be starting another unit or what is your
No,
plan?
no, 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 no.
You're closing the session.
I'm done. I am done. I am done.
Okay, okay. So then I'm stopping this. Okay. So
Okay, sir.
you have class next Saturday only.
Then today 3 to 5, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. We'll make that time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.